One monarch will fly over 4,000 kilometers, but we knew that we couldn't do that ourselves. And so the only way to do it was really to make it a relay run, like you said. And so every single day we had a different runner that either ran 50K or 100K. And that also meant when you involve that many people, it also means that you can spread your message that much further, because that one runner is going to have connections and networks and family and friends. And so then they can inspire their networks to do something, whether that means to lobby your government, to ban pesticides, to plant pollinator gardens, to talk to your neighbors. There's, every single moment we have on Earth is a moment to do something positive.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, where we attempt to tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners. My name's Craig Lewis, and this week's guest is Carlotta James. She's the director and co-founder of the Monarch Ultra. Launched in 2019, the Monarch Ultra is an epic environmental run and conservation project, one which aims to raise awareness of the at-risk monarch butterfly. That year, 2019, a team of ultra runners followed the 4,300 kilometres migratory route of the butterflies from Ontario in Canada to central Mexico. It was an incredible 47-day adventure, one that saw Carlotta complete not only her first ultra distance as a runner, but another, and another, and another. I spoke to her about this year's plans for the event, why saving the monarch butterfly is so important to us all, and to start with, what the reasoning is behind the Monarch Ultra.
Well, the Monarch Ultra is really a vision for a new way of living with each other. I know that sounds a little abstract, but it just means that I think, we need to enter a new consciousness into a new way of living because of all the challenges that we're facing as a human species. And so the idea for the Monarch Ultra really came about with my long connection and my journey with running, which I've been doing since I was a little girl. But the idea of following the monarch migration really came about one summer in 2016 when I started to notice that there were very few monarch butterflies in the natural spaces and the trails where I usually run, which is in Peterborough, Ontario. And because of that decline of monarch butterflies, I started to really think about what that meant for their species, but also what we as the human species could do to protect them and to conserve them. And so then when I found out that monarch butterflies travel over 4,000 kilometers from Canada all the way to Mexico, going through 3 countries, I started to think about them as ultra runners or ultra flyers. And the more I learned about them, I thought, well, they're the real ultra marathoners, and there's some really crazy people out there, like that guy that you just told me from your photo, who ran from North Africa to South Africa throughout the whole continent. So there's people that are doing a lot of great things to raise awareness and as a call to action. And so that's where the beginning of the Monarch Ultra really came from. I really wanted to galvanize people and to get them motivated for the natural environment. And I thought that the monarch butterfly is a beautiful species, but at the same time, one that's disappearing. We could use them as a symbol for resilience, but also as a call to action. And so that's how it started from that summer in 2016. And then I just started doing research and outreach and making connections. And then I figured, okay, let's create this project and we'll run from north to south and we'll follow the monarch migration. It had never been done before. And so it just was a lot of blood and tears to make it happen. And then finally, 3 years later in 2019, on September 19th in 2019, we began the journey, and it was a 7-week journey, covered over 4,000 kilometers. And yeah, it was an epic adventure, and also one that changed my life for the better.
And as people may be guessing, aside from the possibility of having some of these crazy runners who do really ridiculous distances, with a distance that high of 4,000 kilometers, and unless you are a monarch butterfly, you're probably not going to be able to do it yourself. So I think you hit upon the idea of doing this as a relay, didn't you?
Yeah, and that was it, because Yeah, one monarch will fly over 4,000 kilometers, but we knew that we couldn't do that ourselves. And so the only way to do it was really to make it a relay run, like you said. And so every single day we had a different runner that either ran 50K or 100K. And that also meant when you involve that many people, it also means that you can spread your message that much further, because that one runner is going to have connections and networks and family and friends. And so then they can inspire their networks to do something, whether that means to lobby your government, to ban pesticides, to plant pollinator gardens, to talk to your neighbors. There's, every single moment we have on earth is a moment to do something positive. And so we just felt as a relay run that would make a greater impact. There were also, because it was such a new project and a new idea, we had a lot of sections that didn't have runners. And so myself and the race director, Clay Williams, who's also an ultra runner, we would step in and run 50K. So we also ran a lot of legs ourselves. But the thing, I'm sure you know this, Craig, the thing with anything difficult, the more you do it, it actually becomes easier. So the first time it was like, whoa, okay, my body's broken and I don't know if I can do this again. But then you do it again and again and again. And it's the same as standing in front of a crowd of, a couple hundred people. It's really nerve-wracking to talk about something that you're passionate about and to speak from your heart. But then the more you do it, it's like second nature. And so, I wasn't prepared for this podcast. I didn't know that we were going to do this with each other, but I'm so used to talking about the Monarch Ultra that it's okay because I'm speaking from a place of love.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, I did kind of throw this episode on Carlos to say apologies for that. That's definitely my fault. But one thing I think which is quite interesting about the Monarch Ultra is we talk about races, whether it's a 5K or a 10K or a marathon or the longest, hardest ultras out there, and quite often they are ultimately exactly that. They are races, but I suppose the relay nature of this means it's intrinsically not a race. It's more of a, it's just a run at people's individual challenges. And I just wonder whether you feel that fits in with the overall ethos of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, Craig, because at first I thought a lot of people would want to sign up because a race is a race is a race. At the end, you get a medal. And we were really trying to change the narrative to say, instead of running for a medal, why not run for a cause? And what I learned through the whole journey is that actually runners love running for a medal. They love the competitive nature. They love being with other people. They love the start line, the gun going off, the cheering crowds, the swag bags. And so, I was very naive when I started this project. And I thought, oh yeah, there's going to be lots of people who want to sign up. It's a relay run. What a cool idea. You get to do something really different. But actually it took a lot of my work was like marketing and promotions and awareness raising. And what I learned was that no, not a lot of people actually want that. They want the medal. And so it was a very few number of people that wanted to run for a cause. And for the most part, runners actually like running with somebody else and running in crowds, and they join running groups, for example. And so I think it was probably based on my own running experience. I've mostly always run by myself in nature. And so I'm seeking a deeper connection to why I'm actually running. I'm not running to have chit chats and you know what, it's actually all okay. If you want to run for a medal, do it. If you want to run for a place, for status, for swag, for fame, or if you want to run for nature. And so I guess I've just been humbled by the whole journey, and that it's really hard to organize a relay run, and mostly people want to run for a medal. I mean, I'm involved in a lot of races throughout the whole year, and I love it. The energy is so great. The vibes at trail races, I mostly do trail races, which are very different to road races. The vibe is a really good one. There seems to be a lot more care for each other and also the natural environment. So yeah, organizing a relay run has been really hard. This year, we're doing things a little bit differently. We're organizing a race, and it's been a lot easier to find participants. So
tell us about what's the plan for this year's event then? Presumably also there has been something of a gap since 2019 because of the pandemic, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, so 2019, we did our epic 4,300 kilometer ultra marathon from Canada to Mexico. And then the pandemic hit in early 2020. And what that meant was that countries like Mexico, where they rely on a lot of tourism, were heavily hit, especially with ecotourism, because all of the borders were closed and flights were canceled. And so I was very motivated when I found out that the sanctuary that we're closely aligned with and the conservation organizations that we're closely aligned with were heavily hit. It meant that they had no money coming in. And so in 2020, I did I asked my husband to run a 50K fundraiser run. And so it was just the two of us. And I aimed to raise $5,000, and that would be 100% for the sanctuary. And we did it. And so that was really great. We were happy. It meant that some forest protectors were hired and they had work for the year. In 2021, the pandemic was still all over the world, or we were still faced with that challenge. And so the Monarch Ultra could not run to Mexico. The borders were closed. And so instead we ran in Ontario, which is the province where Peterborough is. And Ontario is a beautiful place. There's many lakes. So we just followed a 2,100 kilometer relay run. And so it was much shorter. It was 3 weeks, but it was still the same idea of raising awareness, connecting with communities, and also raising funds. In 2021, we raised $10,000 for Camp Kawartha, which is a local education organization that teaches kids all about nature. And then last year, so basically every year we're doing things. we're very motivated and excitable or passionate people. And then last year we had something called the Zitácuaro Summit, and we wanted to share with our community what was happening close to the sanctuary, to the Monarch Sanctuary. And now this year, initially we had planned on running to Mexico again, but then I was notified by this other ultra runner named Anthony Bata, which I'm giving a shout out to. He is an ultra runner who decided to create something similar to what we did and run the Monarch Migration. So you should probably interview him next, because he's actually doing the entire thing by himself. So he called me last year and he said, "Oh, I had this idea to follow the Monarch Migration and I was really excited. It was going to take me, it was going to be over 4,000 kilometers. And then I went to go and buy the website, Monarch Ultra, and it was taken." And he said, "I didn't realize you'd already done it." And so I was really excited. He's, I gave him our blessing. And so he's doing it himself. So he's running every single day, 50 kilometers until he gets to Mexico. So we didn't want to have two, competing runs to Mexico for Monarch. So we said, let's do something completely different. This is his year. He's training for it. He's planning in it. I'm sure you'd love to meet him as well, Craig. He's a very nice guy from Montreal, Canada. And so this year we decided, let's just have some races. It'll be fun. And so we have a short distance here in Peterborough of 10K. And then we have a 50K in Zitácuaro, Mexico, where we have very close connections to with the government and the community groups and indigenous groups as well. And the same idea, all the donations raised will be for the sanctuary, but in this case, it's all for tree planting activities. For a number of years now, there has been a lot of illegal logging that has happened in Mexico, close to the sanctuary. I was just there last November, and it was heartbreaking to see how many trees have been taken down, and in their place, avocado farms have started. And so it's a thing that you have to ask yourself: if you eat avocados, do you continue to eat them or do you stop eating them? But then it also means that Mexican farmers won't have money. So I think it's just about, if the Mexican government and their economy can provide a different economic system. But definitely, we of course don't support cutting down trees in the sanctuary, because monarchs will lose their home. They essentially become, refugees.
Yeah, and it becomes a really fascinating and complex thing to try and, I guess, be in some ways eco-friendly and do things right, because a lot of the advertising says, "Oh, it's great to have avocado. It's a healthy food. It's good for you. If you have avocado on toast for your breakfast rather than, I don't know, bacon and eggs or whatever, oh, that's a good thing." But actually, there's these other complications that you're not necessarily told about and you don't think about. And there's quite a challenge to try and live a life which is of use to the world, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think we stopped eating avocados for a number of years, my family and I, and we're all vegetarians. And yeah, avocados actually provide a lot of essential protein,
Yeah.
especially if you're a vegetarian. But then when we found out what was happening in Mexico to the sanctuary, we thought, okay, this is one little thing we can do. We just won't eat avocados. But then since learning that it actually doesn't have an impact, it has an adverse impact. It's a very complicated thing. And like you said, I think you just have to do your research, figure out what's right. And I think if we can, each of us as global citizens, as people who care, if we can just make as little of an impact as possible. I remember when I was in high school, and I was learning about Lao Tzu, who's a Chinese philosopher. And Lao Tzu said, if when you run in the forest, if you can leave no footprint, essentially, so if our impact can be as less harmful on the earth as possible, or try to be as less harmful as possible. And I guess that's kind of what I'm always thinking about, just that we're here very temporarily, and it's a shared environment, and not just with humans, but with many, many wildlife species.
Yeah, and I guess this is a kind of really glib question, but why should people care so much about something as tiny and, in some people might say, unimportant? Not so I believe, but as a little butterfly,
Yeah, I know it's hard because they're. I always like to think of them as the invisible, and so it's like making the invisible visible. Butterflies are part of what's known as the group of insects called pollinators. And pollinators are keystone species. And what a keystone species means is that without pollinators, everything else on Earth will collapse. We need them for absolutely everything, including food security. Most of the food that we eat has been pollinated by pollinators, including, I know Brits love chocolate, and coffee and tea. So every single one of those is pollinated: nuts, fruit, vegetables. I mean, even, the grains that cows eat. So it has ripple effects. And so it's not just for food security, but it's also for all the flora around the world. Whenever we see a beautiful flower, it needs to be pollinated, including, the flowering trees that also produce fruit. So that I think that's why people should care. Scientists have already called it the insect apocalypse. We are in it right now, and it's going to be very scary in the future if our insects continue to disappear. But I think that's the thing with monarchs. I fell in love with them, and it also meant that I could fall in love with all pollinators. And so when I see bees and butterflies in my gardens, it makes me so happy, because I know that they're doing such an important job, but also they're so mysterious. They're the invisible. And so, if you really look at them, you'll see their beautiful wings, or their proboscis, their tongues. So I think monarchs are just the gateway to all of nature. Once you fall in love with monarch butterflies, you'll fall in love with so many other wildlife species and plants as well. So it's an awesome journey, and I hope to share it with everyone around me. My family and friends, I probably drive them a little bit crazy because I talk about that a lot. But then at the same time, it's also, if they've seen a monarch butterfly, they'll tell me, or they'll take photos. So people, it's having an impact. And even like older people that I know who are in their 80s who never knew about it now know about it. So it's never too late to learn. And I think even in England, there's a monarch species. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do get monarchs over here. I think I'm pretty sure we do. I'm sure some if we don't, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case. But I guess for people wondering what is the state of the species at the moment in terms of bless you, in terms of numbers and so on, because they are or they were reducing, weren't they? Which is, that's the bottom line of this. We've got a beautiful, clever, intelligent species that can travel 4,000 kilometers and is vital to our own survival. And they're starting to well, I don't know if become extinct is too strong, but ultimately that's the danger, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely what's happening. We have two different migratory populations in Canada. One is called the Western, and those travel from British Columbia to California. And there's like 4% of their population that is left. So that one is very, very close to extinction. The one that we followed in 2019 from Peterborough to Macheros, Mexico is called the Eastern Migratory Migration. And that one, 80% of their species have disappeared. So like you said, they are on the road to extinction. There's some groups that don't want to say that. They just would rather say that, we need action. But I mean, in reality, it's the numbers. You always have to look at the numbers. And so I think, we're at a point right now in our society where citizens can do so many bloody things to bring them back. You can convert your front lawn into pollinator habitat. You can save seed. You can also, if you have kids and students, encourage schools to have a wildlife area, because those wildlife areas will support pollinators like monarch butterflies. And it's not just about monarch butterflies, but it's also learning about the plant that they need for their survival. Butterflies are not like bumblebees and other native bee species. Bumblebees are called generalists. And what that means is they can eat anything. So, you go to a potluck, you can eat the meatloaf, the potato salad, the lentil. They just love everything. But monarch butterflies, they're specialists. And so that means they need one plant species for their survival. And that in Canada, or in North America, I should say, it's called milkweed. And so milkweed is so important that if there is no milkweed, you will not have any monarch butterflies. And what the monarch butterfly does is they lay eggs on the milkweed. And when the egg turns into a caterpillar, that's the one food source that they eat. When they, go into their chrysalis and then they turn into a butterfly, they can eat, or they can have nectar from any sort of flowers. But for their regeneration, to ensure the survival of the monarch butterfly, they need milkweed. And so they're known as specialists. And so the more that we know this in Canada and the States and Mexico, the three countries of their migration to plant milkweed, to protect milkweed, and especially to not spray milkweed. In Canada, it was considered a noxious weed. And so it was sprayed and removed. And it is very noxious. It's noxious to humans, but it's not noxious to monarch butterflies. And that's what makes them really cool as well, is that the caterpillars eat it. And then that means the birds will smell the toxins and they won't eat the caterpillar.
Oh, incredible. Wow.
It's so incredible. I know.
Yeah, no, it really is. I love stories like that in nature, with the ways that various animals and creatures and insects and whatever will do something which would be terrible for another creature, and ultimately it ends up being the thing that protects them.
I know. It's really cool. There's this tree in Mexico called the ceiba, and it's considered like a really sacred tree to indigenous groups there. And the ceiba has it's a huge tree. I mean, the trunk, can be like 10 feet wide. And what makes the ceiba also really cool is that, it also has medicinal properties, but on the bark of the ceiba, and it's spelled Ceiba, it has really big thorns. And when I've been to Mexico before with some indigenous groups, they told me, that those thorns, although it makes it look tough, it actually protects it from other species that will eat the bark. And so the thorns it's like armor.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff, really. I wanted to touch very quickly, because you mentioned it earlier, on sort of your own running and your own running career, because running is the vehicle for which this environmental action is taking place. And you mentioned that you've done a lot of running over the years.
Yeah, well, I started off just running running cross country when I was in high school. And then I lived in the UK for a number of years, in London and Bath and Newcastle.
Oh, that's a nice variety.
Yeah, it's a really nice variety. You got the crazy city of London with absolutely everything. And then Newcastle was interesting. And then Bath is just so beautiful. But I would meet Brits that introduced me to 10K distances. And I was like, what the hell? That's so long. I remember going to Wales and running a 10K race, and it was really bloody hard. And I thought that was so tough. And I was like, this is the longest distance I will ever, ever, ever do. And I kind of just kept at it. And then when I moved back to Canada to go to the U of T, or the University of Toronto, I started to learn about, half marathons. And I was like, Jesus Christ, 21K, who does that? And then you just learn more about more distances. And then I learned about marathons. And so I thought, I tried my first marathon, and it basically killed me because I did something that you should never do. I overtrained. The week before the marathon, I ran like 38K, like the weekend before.
Wow.
Yeah.
At least you knew you had the distance in you.
Yeah. Well, no. And then the marathon came, and I think my sister ran part of it with me. I was so broken. I was in tears, and I think I ran it in 4 hours. It was a disaster.
That's not bad. That's not too bad a time though.
Yeah. And then I learned that you should never overtrain, and you don't run basically a marathon before a marathon. And then one of my good friends from the UK, Corinne, she contacted me and she said, oh, let's do this trail race in British Columbia. And I was like, what's a trail race? I'd never even heard of a trail race of trail runners. And she said, oh, it's, you run up and down the mountain. And I was like, what? That's bonkers. But it also sounded really interesting. And so we met in British Columbia, and that was the first trail race I did. And it was called the Frosty Mountain Trail Race. And I don't remember what the vertical gain was, but it was insane. It was, yeah, I just remember being in so much pain. But then at the end of the race, I met these really great people that kind of just hung out and shared their food with us. And there was a big barbecue, and the race director gave everyone a bottle of wine. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And it was disgusting, but it was still very generous of him. And then after that trail race, I basically stopped doing all road races, all marathons. And then I just did trail running. And so that was probably an easy jump to then learning about the monarch butterfly, because after, I'd only run on roads. And then after that trail race, I would only look for trails, basically. And then that's where your connection to nature really, really deepens, because you see everything. You see snakes, you see frogs, you see herons, but then you also see, oh, that piece of land over there that had forest is gone now, and there's a subdivision. Something isn't right, And so it just starts to open up all these new ways of thinking. And yeah, and then, I had never run an ultra before starting the Monarch Ultra, but then I realized, okay, I can't talk about this ultra marathon and organize it. I have to also become an ultra runner. So for the Monarch Ultra, I trained that whole year of 2019. And so I was able to run my first ultra for the Monarch Ultra. And so that was a big celebration. And since then, I probably do a couple of ultras a year. Next year, I'm going to try my first 50 miler, which is 80 kilometers. I'm really, really nervous, but I know the running community is really supportive, and they can give all these tips on how to not fail. So have you ever run a 50 miler, Craig?
Oh no, the most I've ever done is 30. So yeah, 50's way above where I am. So, but yeah, I guess the from the people I've spoken to who say they do, the best things about running that sort of distance are you can walk and you can eat. So
yeah. One of my best friends just did her first 100 miler last weekend for a race called the Halliburton Trail Race. And it's supposed to be one of Ontario's hardest. And so I got to pace her for her last 40 kilometer leg. And it was a really difficult journey. But I'm proud of her. She did it. One of only 2 women that completed it. So yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely. I still find that the people I speak to who've done these long distances, I just find it's such an extraordinary thing to do, and such an extraordinary thing to do because of the power of the mind as much as the physical element of it, to just keep going and keep going. I mean, the last attempt I did a really long run of that distance where I ended up doing a marathon distance, so nothing short, but I had to stop because I got such horrendous cramp. I was lying on the floor for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just think, oh wow, how do you add another 70 miles, 80 miles on top of that? I just can't fathom it. But these people, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's so much more about the mind because you can train your body and, with any ultra distance, it's all about time, just putting time on your feet, getting your feet acclimatized to those distances, to the 10, 20, 30, whatever, 50 kilometers. But then, once your body is trained, you got to also train your mind because your mind will go into some deep, dark places and tell you that you can't do it, or tell you that you're in pain, or tell you that you're exhausted. And actually, you can change your mind around. You can say to yourself, yeah, the pain is very temporary. I'm okay. I can keep going. Yeah, I'm exhausted, but I can sleep after, or damn, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather be sitting and whatever, having a drink. But at the same time, you can put yourself through so much more. And once you've completed one really difficult challenge, then you're going to be ready for the next one. And so it's kind of really cool. I remember one of my friends said this to me. She's not a runner, but she said, there's not many things in life that you discipline yourself to go further and further. Do you know what I mean? You can be really great at any sport, but then you're just really great at any sport. With running, because of the ultra distances, you can keep going further and to see what your body and mind are capable of. I mean, that's such a cool experience. And like she said, there's not many things in life where you have that opportunity to see how much further you could possibly go and then do it again and go further the next time.
Yeah, definitely. And just to round up and I guess draw all those things together in terms of if anybody wants to both push themselves to incredible new feats and distances and help the Monarch Butterfly, how do they enter the Monarch Ultra? How do they get involved?
Well, you can always be a volunteer. We're all volunteers. So you can donate your time and energy. But if you also just want to run, you can visit our website, themonarchultra.com, and you can register for either the Peterborough race or the Zitácuaro race. The Zitácuaro race is going to be so incredibly beautiful. It's the first time that they're organizing this 50K race with an organization. They usually just have 5K distances. Runners are going to be so supported. I was there last fall for their 3-day festival, Monarch Butterfly Festival. And basically the whole city comes out. There's so much celebration, there's dancing, there's food, there's this cheerful attitude to celebrate something so beautiful. Zitácuaro has 160,000 people. It's at the foothills of the sanctuary. So you're surrounded by these beautiful Sierra Madre mountains. And so to be able to race to the sanctuary in these along these beautiful trails, I mean, there is quite a lot of vertical gain, I should mention. I think it's about 1,800 meters, close to 2,000 meters. But then you get to run back to the city and you'll have a massive, massive cheering squad. And then you get to be part of the 3-day festival as well. So it's going to be such a cool experience. Plus, you're going to be running with lots of other Mexican runners. Our part is just to be in charge of the 50K distance and all the international runners. But Zitácuaro at the same time is organizing a 5K, a 10K, a half a marathon distance because they wanted to make it more accessible, but we're not organizing any part of that. So yeah, if any international runner wants to run it, they can run the 50K, or you just show up and run the 5K, but that's not, we won't be able to help you on that. I mean, we'll be there to, cheer you on, but you'll just have to figure out things, how to register and all that when you get there. And the dates I should mention is the November 24, 25, and 26, 2023. And Craig, if you haven't been to Mexico, I hope you can go. We already have everything sorted in terms of hotels and tour guides. So if, we've done all the legwork, and if you're looking for what are the names of the hotels and how to get from Mexico City to Zitácuaro, for example, airport transfers, it's all on our website. We even found a tour operator who speaks English, and she's willing to help all the international runners. So yeah, you just have to basically show up. Actually, no, you have to train because it is going to be quite difficult, and then show up and have a great time. And it's Mexico. So it's the best food on earth. It's so bloody good.
Oh, it just sounds it does sound an absolutely fantastic event, and for such a wonderful cause as well. So I really do wish you all the best of luck with it. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Running Tales podcast.
Yay! Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Carlotta James for coming on the Running Tales podcast to talk about the Monarch Ultra. If you want to learn a little bit more about the event, then please do check out themonarchultra.com. And if you enjoyed our chat today, then you might want to check out our previous podcast episode with Carl Wright. Now, Carl is an ultra runner who actually only started running when he was already 55 years old, when he was told he needed to lower his blood pressure. These days, he takes part in a whole host of ultra events, and he also acts as an ambassador for the Monarch Ultra, having taken part in that inaugural event back in 2019. If you like today's podcast, please do leave us a rating or a review wherever you listen. And if you perhaps prefer a written version, then also check out our newsletter at runningtales.substack.com, where you can access both free and paid for subscriptions for loads and loads of extra content. Thanks again for joining us this week, and we'll see you again soon for another Running Tale.